Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciations.
Despite his ongoing health problems, Pope Francis has plans for the rest of the year, including something that was just announced. And this goes to the root of the influence of essentially the American government and the people behind it in the church going back to the 60s at least, and really to World War II. And that is, he has a major ecumenical dialogue encounter planned between the Catholic Church, meaning the Church Jesus Christ founded on the rock of Peter, and, the worshippers of the crescent moon and its false prophet. This massive plan, unless we have a new pope in May, is set to happen in May. And I say if we have a different pope, then maybe he will be somebody more sensible who will cancel such a diabolical meeting. The entire premise of this ecumenical dialogue session is to really cement the idea of Catholics and Christians more broadly, along with the followers of the crescent moon and its false prophet, having fraternity and brotherhood. Really what it is institutionalized lukewarmness. And that characterizes the post-conciliar era in the church almost to a T. After the Second Vatican Council, the church kind of backed off of a lot of its claims. Yes, it still said and taught that it was the church Jesus Christ founded on the rock of Peter, guided to all truth. And the church never formally denied that the words of Jesus Christ when he said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." It never even formally rejected extra ecclesia nulla salus, the outside of the church there is no salvation. It just redefined all of those things. Not formally, obviously, because that would be a mass-scale apostasy that is unfathomable. But in practice, it did do those things. It did say, well, Jesus is the privileged path of salvation. Being in the church means a whole host of things that means being in the church doesn't mean much, and a lot of other things. That can all be boiled down to the idea that indifference and lukewarmness have reigned supreme, and this has become obvious in the last decade or so under Francis. Despite his health problems, he has made plans for this year. Let's see what happens, of course, but right now we have news of a major ecumenical meeting, going to be the biggest since Abu Dhabi, and done in the spirit of the 1986 Assisi conferences. Assisi conferences were a statue of that fat false prophet mystic thing from the Eastern mysticism traditions was placed on top of a tabernacle in a Catholic church right in front of the Pope, and a monk was arrested trying to stop that sacrilegious act of blasphemy from happening. That happened, and that has influenced dialogue in the church with other religions since that time. So we go to LifeSite News for this article. Headline: Pope Francis plans major interfaith event for fraternity between Catholics and the worshippers of the crescent moon religion. Pope Francis has reportedly tasked the Vatican to organize a high-level interreligious event with redacted, following a request from the rector of the Grand Temple of Paris, who cited Francis's Fratelli Tutti as inspiration for the event. Now, if you don't know what Fratelli Tutti was, it was the document that was born from the Pan-Amazon Synod. That was the synod of bishops that happened in 2019 in October. It started with the Pachamama debacle, a pagan idol being venerated by people who should have known better in first the Vatican Gardens and then in St. Peter's Basilica. They then tried to tell us it wasn't really a pagan idol. They went through this song and dance about it being a statue of the Virgin Mary, but at the end of the day, that is not what it was. It was a pagan idol, and they admitted it. They just said this was all part of the spirit of dialogue and things. To give you an idea of the kind of people we're talking about here. That was in October. A month later, out of China, we got the word of the things that were coming to all of us in 2020 starting to happen. I firmly believe Francis unleashed that on the world by allowing such an act of sacrilege and blasphemy to happen at St. Peter's Basilica. But that document, Fratelli Tutti, was born out of the Pan-Amazon Synod, and it talked about universal human fraternity, and it spoke about ecumenical dialogue and all the rest of it. It also had a rather healthy dose of environmental language in there as well. This is the grounds for which this meeting is going to happen in Rome. Go to the article. Quote, Upon the suggestion of the rector of the Grand Temple of Paris, Pope Francis has reportedly tasked the Vatican to organize a high-level interreligious dialogue event between the Crescent Moon worshippers and Catholics this year. As the outcome of a February 10th private audience with Kamzeddin Hafiz, the rector of that Grand Temple, Pope Francis has instructed the Vatican's dicastery for interreligious dialogue to coordinate yet another event to promote fraternity between that false faith and Catholicism. Hafiz's idea of a, quote, new international meeting for a brotherhood of Christians and redacted in Europe on a continental scale was presented to the Pope during their encounter, which is their second such meeting after they first met in 2022. How many of our prayers have risen like two shores called to join together? How many hearts have opened to the certainty that the love of God is reflected in our will to love all his creatures? So began the message delivered by Hafiz to Pope Francis on Monday of last week, during which Paris's leading redacted sought to win papal support for the cause of his people who are facing increasing stigma. For too many years in the West, redacted has been perceived through the distortion prism of fear-based violence and other violence. This misperception fuels the discourses that are hostile to redacted who are facing increasing stigma, Hafiz stated in his message. End quote. Notice no mention by him of the violence caused by the people in question. Go figure. This is becoming a hot-button topic of discussion. Now, that letter was actually originally made public on Thursday, the day before Francis went to the hospital for his current issues that he's going to be in the hospital for who knows how long for. And as much as I personally find him objectionable, I do pray that he recovers and he makes his peace with God. He gets on the side of the angels before it's too late. Heaven rejoices at the conversion of a sinner. It is a tragedy when anybody rejects the grace God offers them. Be that as it may. This kind of ecumenical prayer meeting is atrocious. There is no place for this. There is an error that has been widespread promoted either in the spirit of Vatican II or because of Vatican II. You could debate this endlessly. But before the council, the church never said this. But after the council, you started getting whispers about that the followers of the Crescent Moon religion. By the way, you can't criticize that on this platform. If you do, you will get canceled. I found that out the hard way. But they apparently worship the same God as us, according to most of the bishops, citing Vatican II documents. Now, Cardinal Burke, for his credit, says, no, that's nonsense, as do most of the better bishops frequently challenge Francis and his weird assertions. But you get the idea. It's a weird attempt to synchronize the two faiths. Completely separate religions, try to synchronize them and make them say that they're essentially the same thing, when in reality, their so-called holy book denies dogmas of the Catholic faith. Overtly is designed to be hostile to it. So what's the point of such ecumenical dialogue? I can understand if, given the state of Europe right now, church leaders wanting to essentially be good neighbors with the people in question. I can understand that, but that's not what this is about. At least not only. There's something more here. And it's fueled by indifference. Indifference made possible by the inflow of dollars from the U.S. government and other Western agencies. That's how this has happened. Money can make people do strange things. Back to the article. Quote, Hafiz cited Francis's 2020 encyclical Fratelli Tutti, which promoted interreligious activity and fraternity, which is widely argued to promote religious indifferentism, highlighting the theme of dialogue. Along with Pope Francis's equally controversial 2019 Abu Dhabi document on human fraternity, itself a key text showing Francis's desire for collaboration with leaders of that faith, and which was heralded by Hafiz as, quote, a turning point in the dialogue between Christians and redacted, Fratelli Tutti has become the go-to reference text for all such events relating to the topic of fraternity. But fraternity between Christians and those in question in Europe, said Hafiz, quote, is nonetheless threatened by indifference, dehumanization, fear of others, and of the future. This he partly attributed to how that religion is perceived by people who aren't part of it, as he urged Europe to welcome them more than it does, and added that Europe has, quote, long been a land of diversity. The followers of the Crescent Moon of Europe are also acting as protectors, as citizens, and intend to shape a peaceful future, said Hafiz. But the lands that welcome them now seem to be inhabited by fear. Many Europeans are giving up hope, locking themselves into a narrow vision of themselves and rejecting those they no longer see as brothers and sisters. End quote. Ladies and gentlemen, why do you think that is? Why do you think the people of Europe are suddenly looking on this situation with fear? You let me know in the comments why you think that is. I can't say, but you and I know the reason. And it was all made possible by, again, two things. A secularization fueled by NGO dollars and the rest, and people leaving the faith. And people left the faith in large numbers, all the data shows it, after the changes imposed on the church after the council. You can see it in all the data. People stopped going to Mass, priests left seminary, women religious left the religious life, people stopped going. Fueled by the changes in the church, as well when they were so disastrously perfectly timed, coincide with the grotesque changes in the broader culture. Those things happened. The timing was diabolically perfect. And the leader of that community in Europe will say, does not understand why Christians are afraid. Perhaps he should look in the mirror. Perhaps he should take a look deeply at what it is the people keep doing in the news now, every week, it seems like, in Germany and other parts of Europe. Maybe he'll get the answer he needs. Probably won't like what he finds. Let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. And like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So does sharing this on social media. That helps too. If you ever thought about supporting the work of Return to Tradition, now is a great time to do so. You can hit the join button below, or you could, there's this in the description box below are links to Patreon and Subscribestar and those kind of things, all of which viewers asked for. It does help keep these daily messages coming, and it is greatly appreciated. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.